Classroom podcast show.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Animation Fixation Podcast, where we talk everything animation.
In today's episode, we will be looking at a stop-motion animation directed by Wes Anderson that was first released in 2009 and brings together a star-studded cast that includes George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Bill Murray, Owen Wilson, and William Dafoe. The film we will be discussing about is, of course, Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Based on the 1970 children's novel of the same name by Roald Dahl, Fantastic Mr. Fox follows the mischievous adventures of Mr. Fox. After 2 years or 12 fox years of blissful peace, Mr. Fox finally breaks a promise to his wife by raiding the farms of their human neighbours, Bogus, Bunce and Bean, to which they seek violent retribution. Giving in to his animal instincts has endangered not only his marriage to his wife Felicity, but also the lives of his family and their friends. When the farmers force Mr. Fox and company deep underground, it is up to him to resort to his natural craftiness to rise up to the challenge. But has he gone too far this time?
While the film was technically a success, bringing in $46 million on a $40 million budget, it still wasn't enough of a success that the studio was hoping for. That being said, the film has garnered many loyal fans with an approval rating of 93% on Rotten Tomatoes since its release. The film was also nominated for a 2010 Critics' Choice, Golden Globe, and the 2010 Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, and an Academy Award for Best Original Score, but unfortunately the film would lose all the nominations to Pixar's Up. So Caitlin, despite just how popular this film has become, do you think that doing the film as stop motion was the best creative choice for the film, or do you think that it could have worked better as a different style of animation?
I think stop motion is a fine choice for this film. It really gives you this storybook, or gave me this storybook feel. To me, it felt very much like a children's story playing with dolls. You know, you get these beautiful cross sections of sets, so you kind of see them running along while you see what's happening in the rooms underneath. You'll see these beautiful effects that feel so physical. So stuff like the water done with saran wrap, or the smoke done with cotton fiber. It's really physical and beautiful, and it feels like this beautiful child story played out with puppets or dolls. And so I think it's a really beautiful choice for this film. I think it really plays into that storybook element. But what do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I completely agree. And with Wes Anderson's very unique style of filmmaking, you bringing up the fact that it's got a very storybook quality to it, Wes Anderson's style of filming really lends itself very well to stop motion. And the story of Fantastic Mr. Fox is a story that was written by Roald Dahl. So I feel that if you were to go with, say, 2D or 3D animation, it really wouldn't give you that same sort of storybook effect, regardless of how good 3D animation is these days. So stop motion, I think, was the best choice for this film.
I know they also really wanted to make the stop motion a feature, so not just a vessel to tell the story, but actually really play into the stop motion elements of it. So they've actually shot this at 12 frames a second, so you really get the feeling of that kind of slightly more jilted movement of stop motion.
Yes.
They really wanted to draw attention to this. And one other thing that I found really interesting is when they were building the puppets, they wanted to use real fur, so real animal fur for all of the puppets where they could, to kind of give it a much more natural effect. Also, the human characters all have human hair that was donated by the puppet makers. So that's really cool. Like the fact that even though it's kind of added this extra layer of complexity, because as you're putting this fur on and you're moving the characters around, you're going to get this rippling in the fur as the animators are handling the puppets. But Wes Anderson really wanted to make a feature of this. He really wanted that beautiful rippling to come through in the
Make
fur.
Make it very obvious and clear.
Absolutely. So I think this isn't just a decision of should this be stop motion or should this be a 3D animation. I think that the goal here was to make something beautiful in stop motion. I think that was so intrinsic to to Wes Anderson's plan for this film, and I think it is beautiful. I think he's done a really good job with it.
Absolutely. It really felt like they were trying to create something that was appreciated both by young audiences and older audiences alike, with just how unique it is, because
Yeah.
it's not done like a film that we see these days, where the story is very flowy. I find that it's cut very abruptly in scenes, and there's some things that I found didn't really make sense at times. Like there's one character, the opossum, that whose eyes just
Kylie, I
his
love
eyes
it.
just they turn into swirls for no reason. And I've watched this film many times, and I still have no idea why his eyes go like
It's supposed to be that that glazed over
Yeah.
effect, like where you don't know if he's listening. He's just kind of off with the pixies a little bit, and so it's meant to be that glazed over, you know, just going with the flow. Is he paying attention? Who knows? Like, because possums tend to have that really glassy-eyed staring. At least opossums, from what I've seen. I've seen like 2 opossums, and I never want to see a third. They're terrifying.
No, Americans are always amazed when they see our possums, and they're like, they're so adorable. What happened to ours?
Yeah, there was some evolutionary mix-up where we got America's possum and they got our possum.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we finally got one thing that's cute and fuzzy and not terrifying in any way, shape, or form.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I think too, going back to the feeling that I got that this was made for older audiences, is because how it's actually shot, the camera angles and the camera movements, they're very simple. They're very rigid, which again, it really adds to that storybook quality.
Yeah, you get presented this tableau, and the scene headings, the way that those are done as well, are really beautifully done. They're just kind of up the top over the scene, and the way that the characters interact with them as well, because there's actually one scene where it looks like, I think it's Ash and Kristoff are able to read the chapter title and go, oh, you guys are doing this, we'll tag along. Like it's quite interesting to see the characters actually interacting with the titles, or being able to kind of almost know that they're in a story and react to things that are happening in another scene.
And in that way, it kind of feels like it doesn't take itself too seriously.
This film does not take itself seriously at all.
Which I love. I love films that don't take themselves seriously. They're a little bit quirky, and this film is very quirky.
Very quirky. It might interest you to know that actually Roald Dahl's story ends with the feast in the mines. So everything past that was all created for the film, and the detail of the blueberries to drug the beagles is actually taken from another Roald Dahl book where they were putting something into raisins.
Is that right?
It actually caused a bit of controversy, and they'd already shot it, and Roald Dahl's attorneys tried to get them to take it out, but they had argued, please, we've already shot it, don't make us redo this. So
that's very interesting. I did not know that. I'd be very interested to hear what a lot of the Roald Dahl purists would actually think of that. Would they be all up in arms, or was the adaptation good enough and loyal enough to at least the Dahl series that, you know, they're happy with it? So I'd be very interested to get their opinion on that.
Yeah, me too.
One other thing that I have to say that I loved about the camera work is the use of parallax. So like quite often you'll have a character that's on a driving by on a road, for example, and the camera is tracking along, and so it looks like the character is moving at a fast speed, but the mountains in the background are moving very, very slowly. And how that was actually done in this film was really, really nice. I absolutely love that detail.
Yeah, it's beautifully done. There's so many gorgeous little details, like just getting there's scenes where the wind just blows through and you just watch these little blades of grass all sway in the wind. Someone has done that by hand on purpose.
There was actually a shot where we see wind go through a hill of grass, and it looked like the outline of someone's hand just pushing through it.
Yeah.
And like that is amazing. I guess that's where the imperfections really come in to add to the look of the film.
It's also amazing just how much they were able to effectively achieve with stop motion. In fact, there's only one CGI scene in the entire film, and that is when the cider goes through the mine and sweeps them all away.
Mm-hmm.
Just that one shot in the liquid. That's it. That's the only time that they've used
That's
CGI.
right.
Everything else is all stop motion.
Which is really refreshing because these days just about everything is done with CGI. Now, we work in 3D animation, visual effects. It's what we do, but you really gain an appreciation for the use of practical effects and not relying so much on CGI because it does take away from live action elements. And it doesn't matter how good something is. You could be looking at Avatar, for example, the quality in that, and it's still not going to feel the same.
Yes, it can be quite jarring sometimes mixing the two as well. So yeah,
Yes.
the fact that they've been very restrained with this and that it's really, if you didn't kind of know to look for it, I don't think you'd really see it. It's such a quick and fast moving scene. It was definitely the right choice to not try and do that in stop motion. That would have been a nightmare.
I could not even imagine how they would actually have done that well without using CGI. Like it would have been so complex. I mean, even Leica, which is one of the it's like the Pixar for stop motion animation. Even Leica uses CGI for some of their shots because it's just not possible.
Yeah.
And this was just one of those cases, and it was done very, very well.
It was. I think overall this is just a beautiful film.
Yeah.
Everything visually is stunning.
Yes.
I love as well the way that it's very subtle, but have you noticed the use of color throughout? Everyone's in these really awesome colors except Christoph because he's the outsider, so he gets to wear blue. And so just these really cute little color pops everywhere. It's just, it's gorgeous. It's like being in a painting.
Yes. Well, once again, coming back to the storybook element.
Absolutely, yeah.
What did you think of the voice acting?
I think the voice acting was phenomenal throughout. I mean, if you look at the cast, they're all amazing, amazing talent. And, you know, you've got, I think Owen Wilson has maybe like 2 or 3 lines in the whole film. But they're all delivered beautifully. Like that coach, I believe him.
Yep.
With every fiber of my being. Like he has a hard job and I feel for him so hard. But no, I think the voice acting throughout is phenomenal. I have absolutely 0 complaints.
I did find that it was very restrained.
Yes.
Nothing was over the top. Now, that being said, it did kind of feel like at times they could have been a bit more expressive with their voice. Like even the farmers that are trying to kill Mr. Fox and they're getting frustrated and everything, they're not yelling or screaming. It's like, get him. It's all very, very restrained.
I feel that's just, it's trying to set the scene of this kind of quiet, kind of middle upper class-ish England where everything is fairly restrained and quite, you know, at least on the surface, kind of quite proper. And then you kind of go down into it.
Yes, that's very true. Now, what are your thoughts on the music? Because this is another film where the music is fairly restrained.
I actually would disagree with you a little bit on that. I mean, it's not over the top, but it's I find quite different. So as you're saying, the voice acting, the performances themselves are quite restrained. I find the music makes it very comedic and very slapstick. It's that kind of that banjo twang throughout.
Yes.
And I find like it is throughout the film. Every time these hijinks are going on, even just kind of under some, you know, regular scenes, you still have that ongoing banjo twang. I find it really lowers the stakes of the film. Like even though, you know, they're being swept away through this mine and they're being starved out by farmers, I find the way that the music hits in every scene makes me take it less seriously.
Yes.
And I'm not sure whether this is an active choice to be, you know, we're portraying something that might be a little bit kind of iffy for kids.
Yeah.
So let's just lower the stakes a little bit with
Yes.
some banjo twang.
Yes, well, see, that's what I mean by restrained. We're not seeing, hearing these huge, great, grand orchestral
Yeah, okay,
musical
yeah.
pieces. Exactly like you said, it kind of
Yeah.
feels like it's taking away the drama from the scene a little bit and making it just that little bit more quirky with that banjo twang, which I think it works perfectly for the quirkiness of the
It's
film.
it's great.
If we started hearing some big orchestral piece, it would
Yeah, yeah, okay.
it wouldn't work. It would feel
No,
so
not at
strange.
all. I also love that, like, the music is obviously non-diegetic, but at times it just becomes diegetic or in-scene music because the characters just stop and have a dance break for
Yeah.
no reason.
Yep.
Just like, we're in the middle of a heist, let's all just stop and dance for a bit.
Yep.
And it's it's just very quirky. I really enjoy it. It brings a smile to my face every time. It's it's beautiful is what it is.
Is there anything that you didn't actually like about the film?
Um, no, like I said, visually, I think this is a stunning film, and the effects are done phenomenally. Like, I was blown away watching the fire and the water because I'm like, I've seen it done before, but I've not seen it done, particularly the water,
Yeah.
to that quality before. That was just it's a step above the rest.
Yeah.
And
Because
honestly, my hat is off.
Because normally with like these stop motion films, they use live action water, or they do it in a way that looks really cheap.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel like that at all.
No, it was beautiful. It was beautiful to watch. It had this, it felt so in keeping with the scene. So obviously they're using saran wrap or cling film, whatever you'd like to call it. But it works so beautifully with the rest of the scene because it has that physical feeling, but it doesn't feel overly realistic. It feels just as kind of clayey
Yeah.
and fake as the rest of the scene, but
Yes.
because it's all so beautifully presented, it just is so perfectly in keeping with the world.
Yes, it works perfectly. And it is quite funny when you look at the smoke from the fire, the little cotton, the traditional cotton coming out of the flames. It's still keeping with that old style of stop motion while still not feeling super cheap.
Yeah, I think the effects in this were just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
One of the effects I actually really quite liked was when they were digging, seeing that the earth just continuously like roll over and over and over and over again as they
Yeah.
it looked like they were kind of swimming in the water, in the dirt.
Yeah, that was really, really cool. I really liked the way they did those digging scenes.
Yeah.
I also the test tubes that are going on in Bean's cider production.
Oh yes.
Those are filled with fruit jelly to get that
Really?
kind of slightly more bubbling physical liquid without it evaporating on set. To get the color and the effect, they were using fruit jelly, which I found quite fascinating.
That's the thing that stop motion really, I feel, goes above and beyond other forms of animation and often regular filmmaking in general, is the fact that the creators really have to improvise to get the looks right, because you're dealing with something that's on a completely different scale. You're not dealing with one-to-one scales. You're dealing with puppets that are 30 centimeters tall, maybe not even that. And so everything has to be scaled down, and because the camera is super close to it, you really have to become quite inventive with how you go about getting specific looks and effects to actually work at that small scale.
Yeah, you've got to be really creative with your solutions to make it work. And yeah, they've done it beautifully.
I will say though, one thing that I really didn't like, I found it very distracting, and it kind of took the quirkiness to a whole other level. And it only happens twice. It happens twice. And that's when Mr. Fox and his wife Felicity glow. At the start, Mr. Fox is like, "You're glowing," and then it cuts to like a mid shot of Felicity right next to Mr. Fox, and she's just like a plastic rigid model with very little detail, but with a light inside of her. And it just looks so strange. And then it cuts back to her normally. And then that happens again at the end of the film where they're both glowing. And it looked very strange. I felt that they went a little too far with the quirkiness on that one. I didn't think it worked.
You know I love a pun, and that's a visual pun, so I'll allow it, Tim. I'll allow it.
I appreciate visual puns, but I don't feel like they pulled that one off very well. It was too quirky for me.
I did actually want to talk about the production of this film. So as you mentioned in the intro, this film had a $40 million budget, and it only made $46 million gross. Which, well, yes, technically is more money than they spent. When you're talking in millions, $6 million is an absolute flop. That's absolutely not what a studio would be hoping for.
No.
And if you look at films of a similar budget, not necessarily of a similar era or style, but just films of a similar budget, Knives Out, roughly a $40 million budget, made about $313 million gross, Cheaper by the Dozen, 168 million gross. Spy Kids 3, 168 million gross.
Ugh.
So this only making 46 would be an absolute flop for the studio and quite disappointing. Do you think there is a particular reason that this didn't do well at box office?
I think because it's not done like a traditional film. It is very quirky. Now, some quirky films do make it through, like Jojo Rabbit, I believe was financially successful, but it's not often that these films that are kind of done outside the norm do financially well. It's usually after they've come out on DVD or streaming that then they start developing that fan base. It takes them a little while longer. So while this film is not a bad film at all, I can understand why it might not have done financially well compared to others.
I think it is first and foremost, even before it is telling the Roald Dahl story of Fantastic Mr. Fox, I think first and foremost it is a Wes Anderson film, and I think people kind of either looked at it and went, it's Wes Anderson, but it's animation, and had a disconnect and didn't want to give it a shot because it went, an animated kids film, not my thing.
Yes,
and then for kids, as you're saying, it's probably a little bit kind of like, for them, not as fast-paced or action-filled as maybe other kids' films that they had been watching, so probably didn't quite hit. It feels like maybe it was a bit confused with its demographic.
Yeah, that's probably true as well.
Although, interestingly, after Fantastic Mr. Fox was released, no other adaptations of Roald Dahl films were made until the BFG in 2016. And that film also failed to break even. So I don't know, maybe Roald Dahl films are just cursed at box office.
Possibly. Do you know how well the original 2D animated version of the BFG was? Was that successful?
I don't off the top of my head.
Because I do believe that the original BFG does also have a fan base, but again, that's something that happened after its initial release.
Yeah, it looks like box office 195 million. So more than this.
But also I find that stop motion seems to have a harder time pulling in audiences. Like, don't get me wrong, some of my favorite films are stop motion animation, but they don't seem to have the same sort of pull on audiences than what 3D animation does. It's just like when 3D first came out, they believed that 2D animation was dead. And even these days, you don't often see 2D animated films being made. They're becoming quite a rarity, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, filmmaking is a business, and studios are only going to make what's financially viable. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because it's not even just about then making your money back on a film. It's about then getting the capital to invest on the next venture and to put into another film. And so you've got to have pretty much every film, for some of these smaller studios as well, every film needs to be a success for them to keep doing business. Something like Disney at this point, I don't know if like they're just too big to fail at this point, because like they've definitely had some
Mhm.
flops, but
Well, the thing with Disney is their films don't even make up most of what they earn. The majority of
no.
Disney's money, like directly linked to Disney, is from their theme parks. So Disney can get away with
Mm,
well, losing money on certain films. But because of their sheer size, they can survive a bad film here and there. A lot of studios can't. Like one bad film has
yeah,
been known to wipe out entire studios.
which is very unfortunate.
It is. It is.
One other interesting production thing that I learned about this film was actually that Wes Anderson wasn't on site for a lot of the production. He was directing animation via email
Really?
from Paris. Now, Tim, you're an
Interesting.
artist.
Yeah.
How would you feel about receiving feedback via email?
Oh, you know what is starting to become more and more common these days?
Yeah,
Um,
post-pandemic world we live in.
yeah, it's not a great way to work, and yet this has Wes Anderson's filmmaking style all over it. So he must be very good at writing emails. Um, yeah, it is a very strange way to work, especially in such a
Yeah.
practical medium as what stop motion is.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very strange directing choice, but I don't know the whole situation. He might have been working on multiple projects at the same time. It happens, and
Yeah, it does.
that might have been the only way that he could have done it. So I I really can't say.
Yeah. Um, I suppose as well. I think most of this was done between America and England.
Mhm.
So particularly if you were doing America to Paris, the time zones would just be a killer in terms of communication and
Oh,
getting timely feedback on things.
our previous
So
project, we were
I
working with Vancouver. We know exactly what that's like.
yeah, it's just as you're waking up, you wake up to 40 million emails from them
Oh,
and
don't get me
trying to
started.
yeah, it's hard to work across time
Mhm.
zones in any
Yeah,
industry, but particularly when you have something so creative and collaborative and
that's
you need a
right.
director's feedback, trying to do that across time zones, you'd only really want to be doing it if you absolutely had to be, because it is really not ideal.
Yeah, no, it's not ideal at all. But again, we don't know the circumstances as to why
Yeah,
he worked like that. If it was purely by his own choice, I probably wouldn't want to. I
question
probably
it.
wouldn't want to work on a Wes Anderson film. Um,
Mm,
but no, look. At the end of the day, he did produce a very good film that does have a fairly large fan base, and
yes.
um, personally, I really enjoyed this film.
Yeah, it was a good film. It was really good. I love it.
Yeah.
I like Fantastic Mr.
Yeah,
Fox.
it's a hard one to hate, to be honest. So
Yeah.
what would you actually rate this film as? Out of 5 stars, what would you give?
Out of 5 stars, I would probably give it a 4.
Yep.
Like, it's a really good film. It's beautifully, beautifully made. And it has a lot of things in here that I really, really like about it. It's quite funny. It feels like a cozy film to watch.
Yes.
It has this really beautiful kind of sense to it. But yeah, I don't know. It's obviously not perfect. It's good, but I'm gonna give it 4 stars. That's just my gut feeling.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I'd definitely give it a 4. It's a
Yeah.
very comfortable 4. It's
Hmm.
not a perfect film, but it's definitely one that I can see myself coming back to several times. In fact, I
Oh
have.
yeah.
It's
Yes.
it's a feel good one. It's nothing too deep. It's just one that you can sit on the couch with some popcorn and enjoy every so often.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any final words, Caitlin?
Only that I apparently was looking at the at Disney's 2016 BFG, and the actual original BFG only made £3 million at box office, not $168 million. Sorry, my Google skills failed me.
Oh. Okay, maybe it is something in...
I haven't seen the budget though, so I don't know
Hmm,
what the percentage is, but
yeah, maybe it's Roald Dahl's stories just don't translate well to film. Well, to financial blockbusters, I'll say.
phenomenal novels.
They're great novels, and personally, I do enjoy the films. But I can't see
Hmm.
any of them becoming blockbusters as what's been proven. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I can never think of how to end this. Caitlin, please take us out. I don't know how to end this.
Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Let us know your thoughts on Fantastic Mr. Fox, and we will see you in the next episode.
Absolutely. Catch you later, guys.
See ya.